some players are coming back, and we're finding out that there's more players that are potentially missing. There's going to be potentially major roster implications for the 49ers with some of these new injury concerns. We're going to be talking about all the news, what happened at practice, what we can expect in this game versus Friday, all in this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Lots of news coming out of Santa Clara. Kyle Shanahan spoke to the media, and we got some news on some players that we weren't really expecting. Some of it is completely expected, and you're not going to bat an eye when you hear it because you probably heard it here already. But the San Francisco 49ers continue to deal with certain players being out. And this has been a question mark for this team for this entire training camp session. Now, the good news has been most injuries have not been significant and weren't expected to affect the 49ers moving into the regular season. Now we're starting to get to the time where injuries definitely can cause you to miss time in the regular season. And that could have not just implications on what happened to the regular season and whether you win games, but also how you go about handling and navigating your 53-man roster, because next week you are going to have to decide. We are just 7 days away from the 49ers having to decide on their roster and who's going to be the 53 men that consist of that roster. Of course, there's going to be a practice squad, and they're going to have to build that too with 16 players that they're going to want to have a mixture of veterans. You could have 6 veterans and rookies, so it's a long process. But the question is, how do you keep as many players as you can without losing them, all the while navigating injuries? Because when you have an injury and a key injury, you can't just put them on IR. I know you got 2 spots. You have to designate those guys for return, but you can't just put them on IR and say, okay, we'll bring them back whenever. You have to make sure you carry some of those guys to your 53-man roster, put that into the league, then the next day put them on IR, and then bring a player back. That's where it gets confusing. You waive a player that maybe a young player that a lot of people like, they're going to get claimed on waivers. You cut a veteran and you don't have a good ability to bring them back. Maybe they go find another team on the open market where they don't have to wait a day. It's all a little bit of work, and it's getting more and more difficult for the 49ers to work out. Not to mention, you still got to figure out how to get Trent Williams, on this team, because you're dealing with the extension and the money with him, but also he counts against your 53-man roster. You can't carry him and just say, oh, no, he's a roster exemption. You carry him on there, so you can't use that roster spot. It has to go to Trent Williams. Same with Brandon Ayuk. They have to have him on that roster, and who knows? Maybe the Brandon Ayuk thing will get done, and we won't even really be considering this, but the 49ers have some real decisions to make, and these roster news and injuries have real implications. Plus, the 49ers had practice today and it revealed a little bit more information, including one wide receiver made a big play down the field that we'll be talking about because we haven't seen him in preseason so far. Maybe we'll see him against the Raiders, and he could end up having a potential chance to change this team a little bit this season. So this is going to be a fun episode. Buckle up and get ready. We're going to talk injuries. We're going to talk implications to the roster. And we're going to talk practice and performance. And we're just going to kind of get it set up for the week. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to kickoff of college football, Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. So where we have to start is the new injury news that comes out that John Feliciano is not just dealing with knee irritation, but he had to undergo surgery. And that means that John Feliciano is going to start the season on IR. Now, we are unclear if it's going to be one of those two spots that you can designate a player on IR before the roster comes out. I'm guessing the 49ers use both of those. Right now, the 49ers still have Ambry Thomas, who's expected to go on IR, and they have Kalia Davis that's expected to go on IR. So if they were going to use those two spots for those two players, it just got more convoluted because now you have a third player that could go to that spot as well. So one of these guys, if you're planning on keeping all three on your 53-man roster, will have to get carried to the 53-man roster, which means you're probably going to have to cut a player that you expect to use during the season and then try to bring them back. For a young player, they have to clear waivers. For a veteran, they have to just decide to go nowhere else, which means veterans are the most likely determination. You have a veteran that has more than 4 accrued seasons, they don't get claimed on waivers. They get to decide where they go, which means you can kind of say, hey, we want you on this roster. You made this 53-man roster, but we need to go ahead and keep this other player and then put them on IR. As soon as they're on IR, we're going to bring you back. And for doing that, we're going to kick you a little bit extra money when you re-sign. It's not supposed to happen, but it happens in every single front office and locker room. They get these deals done, and we've seen it before. 49ers have done this with guys like Kerry Hyder, Tyler Kroft. You go ahead and you release them. They sit back and wait, and then they eventually come back. There's going to be some more guys that I think they do this with this year to make sure that they can build this best 53-man roster, and the players know this is their best chance to win a Super Bowl. So they're going to have to play some roster gymnastics to get all the guys that they want, and John Feliciano being injured just made this thing a little bit more difficult. It also means with him starting on IR, he's not going to be available for the early part of the season, which means that the 49ers are going to rely on young players to get it done. First off, Aaron Banks has to try to get back for week 1. If he doesn't, right now, what will the 49ers do? Will they roll with Nick Zakelj, who's been getting left guard reps and doing a pretty good job? And maybe this helps Nick Zakelj make this roster outright, but it could be Nick Zakelj. Or do the 49ers fool around with moving Dominic Pooney to left guard? I don't think that's the most likely. I think Pooney is going to keep battling with Spencer Burford, and that battle's finally going to start heating up, even though Spencer Burford is unlikely to play in this game. He's still got the hand wrapped, but he is in individual drills and individual practice, just not doing team 11-on-11 drills. But he's working on his way back. I think Dominic Pooney's done such a good job. It might be his job to lose. It might be too little too late for Spencer Burford. But are they comfortable with Nick Zakelj starting at left guard? I think that's going to be the question going into week 1. And with John Feliciano out, it also means Zakelj makes this team because he's the best backup center. So he could be starter and backup center, and then they have to figure something out with that other guard. Could it be Ben Barch? What do you do on the roster? That's what's going to be one of the determining factors. Ben Barch comes back also, guys, from knee irritation. So Barch came back to practice. Spencer Burford came back to practice, even though more so in a limited role. But the 49ers interior offensive line takes a big blow because John Feliciano is not just really good, but really versatile. He's probably, if not the best center, right there with Jake Brendel. He's very, very good. And then at guard, we've seen him last year play games for Banks. We've seen him play games for Burford. He's just solid. So this is a big loss for the 49ers, and now they have to decide how exactly they navigate this roster on the interior, and it might muddy up the decisions they make with who they're keeping. I think Nick Zakelj becomes a foregone conclusion now to make this roster. He went from on the bubble to the way he's played in the preseason, and then also with the current injury news, more of a lock than he's ever been before. So Zakelj looks like he's going to make this 2024 San Francisco 49ers football team. And that's big news for him, and it goes a testament to his work the time that he's put in and the effort that he's put in. So bravo to him. And then the question mark is, does Ben Barch make this roster? I think it just got a little bit tougher for some of the tackles not named Jalen Moore to make this team too. Chris Hubbard likely would be a guy you could release and bring back. So Brandon Parker, I think he's going to be gone. 49ers are slowly figuring this offensive line thing out, but thank goodness that Dominic Pooney is so good because that's going to help this football team be able to navigate through the injuries of Spencer Burford, as it has been right now, and now John Feliciano. So he was expected originally to be starting guard. Now he's expected to start on the IR, and the 49ers could be going with a third-round pick as their starter. So we don't know when Feliciano will come back. At some point, they would be able to bring him back from the IR, meaning that I think he is a real possibility to be one of those two spots that they bring back because his versatility makes him a player they would definitely want to bring back. Now, other guys coming back to practice besides Ben Barch and Spencer Burford, they also had a couple of running backs return to practice today, including Isaac Guerendo. Isaac Guerendo, of course, hurt his hamstring on day one of training camp, and he had a really bad one. It wasn't grade 1 or grade 2. It was worse than that. And so he's been out of it, not able to go out there and produce, but already saw some film of him practicing today. It looked like he was moving pretty well. And of course, they weren't going to let him go out there unless he was ready to roll. But we're going to get our first look potentially at Isaac Guerendo against the Raiders. Kyle Shanahan talked about the fact that Jacob Cowing got 1 full week of practice looking healthy, and they were able to get him out there extensively against the Saints. And it could be that sort of opportunity for Isaac Guerendo, who's looking to make this roster. And if he looks good, it could clear up some question marks about the 49ers, because right now Christian McCaffrey's still not practicing, and we know that he said, yes, if games meant something on Sundays, I could play right now. So McCaffrey, it's not a serious thing. He'll start practicing probably once training camp ends. They'll start working him up to the level he needs to be for that Monday night matchup. Jordan Mason missed practice. He's dealing with a little bit of a hip problem. And Elijah Mitchell still missing practice, which is a little interesting because Kyle Shanahan had said a couple weeks ago that it was a 1-week thing, but yet he's still out. So don't know what's going on with Elijah Mitchell. Maybe they decided just to go ahead and shut it down. Don't know. Cody Schrader got a lot of reps last week. So Cody Schrader expected to get more reps in this one. Isaac Guerendo potentially going to get some carries. We've seen Matt Breida and what he's doing. Another guy coming back into the fold, though, and getting some carries will be Patrick Taylor. And we've been wondering, they held on to him. They didn't waive it or release him, let him go, even though he suffered an injury. But we're going to get to see Patrick Taylor, 6'2", 218, big running back, really good on special teams, and a physical runner, but looked good in training camp when he was practicing. I enjoyed watching him. I thought he had pretty good vision, a pretty good feel, got vertical, ran with physicality. So we've got 2 interesting running backs added to the fold for this 49ers football team. And I think they're going to get some carries. I don't expect to see Jordan Mason. I don't expect to see Elijah Mitchell or Christian McCaffrey. We know we aren't going to see. So it's going to be the young guys. And let's see what kind of performance we get out of Isaac Guerendo. 4.3 speed. Let's see what it looks like on display. Big running back that fast. It's going to be fun to see exactly how he performs for this 49ers team. But it adds questions about who makes this roster. We've been talking about it possibly being, and I've heard it all the way around, Matt Breida or Cody Schrader. Well, if Guerendo's not going on that IR and getting the Cam Latu treatment from last year, well, that means potentially that he's going to be ready to go, and the 49ers may keep him on the active roster, which means that somewhat limits a roster spot for somebody else. So that could mean that Cody Schrader doesn't make this team, and Patrick Taylor doesn't make this team, and Matt Breida doesn't make this team. So what do they do that? Does Patrick Taylor go on the practice squad, or does Matt Breida go on the practice squad? It just makes for more injury. These injuries make for more interesting roster decisions for the 49ers. So every single injury has big implications for this 49ers roster, but it's going to be fun. We're going to get this potentially see Isaac Guerendo running the ball, and the 49ers traded 2 5th-round picks to get this guy. They know he's got whole shot potential. So I'm excited to see him, and I think people will be pleasantly surprised with Patrick Taylor. I think Patrick Taylor has looked good, and hopefully he'll look good in this game. Of course, they need good blocking from the offensive line, and the backup offensive line for the 49ers has been a little suspect because Right now, we have backups playing with the starting offensive line. So it hasn't been as good as it could have been. So we'll see what it looks like. But it's good to get Patrick Taylor and Isaac Garindo back. Noticeable as far as not being at practice for the 49ers was Talanoa Hufanga. So last week, Hufanga was cleared for more football activities, not cleared for all, but cleared for more, which meant cutting, dynamic cutting, running running and cutting off that knee and just seeing how things work and how things go. More drills for Talanoa Hufanga, but Talanoa Hufanga not exactly ready to go. So right now, it's looking more and more likely that we're going to end up seeing George Odom start on week 1. And I've been hoping that it was going to be Talanoa Hufanga. And so we'll see what the 49ers do. I don't believe they've activated him from PUP list, and maybe they won't. Maybe they'll go ahead and leave him on PUP list if he's not ready to go, and then make that roster decision later on. He would have to miss the first 4 games, but that might help them roster-wise and potentially give him more time to get ready and be ready to go. So decisions still to be made when it comes to Talanoa Hufanga and how exactly he's going to help this team early on in the year. So right now, unclear. Let's see what happens for Hufanga and if the 49ers end up activating him off PUP or if they wait and just let this thing go through the roster cut down before they ever make a decision. But if they don't make a decision and activate him before the 53-man roster, he will miss the first 4 games for the San Francisco 49ers. So decision is imminent for Talanoa Hufanga, but right now it doesn't look like he's going to practice this week. Maybe he could practice next week and then potentially have a shot to get in there and help this San Francisco 49ers defense in week 1. A little bit of bad news is kind of what's been going around Twitter. Of course, if you're on the channel and you've been listening since last week, you know this has kind of been my feeling that Ricky Pearsall not going to play in the preseason. Kyle Shanahan confirmed that today. He's not practicing this week. He's not expected to play versus the Las Vegas Raiders. No shock here. I expect him to be ready to go week 1 and play for the 49ers. And I know people are going to say, but what about continuity? He hasn't played in the game. He hasn't played out there with Brock Purdy. I understand that. And would I have loved to see Ricky Pearsall out there practicing and getting reps with Brock Purdy and then getting game reps, with the backup quarterbacks and Purdy? Absolutely. That's not what's going to happen. So I do expect Ricky Pearsall to be ready week 1. I do expect Ricky Pearsall to play week 1. He will have practice time once we get through the 53-man roster. They will start going, and he'll have practice time working up to week 1 versus the Jets, and I believe he will be ready. He will be the 4th wide receiver for this football team, and the 49ers will work him into the lineup. I just don't think this is going to hold him out, but the 49ers are being very precautious with his shoulder and making sure, and if he can't take a hit, there's no reason for him to play against the Raiders. You don't get anything from that. You play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, so let's not do that. Let's not get him hurt, and so if he's not fully ready to go, don't play him. If he ends up being fully ready to go, then sure, play him. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. So Pearsall will not be back. You will not see him against the Raiders, but hopefully we will see him play against the New York Jets on Monday night. So let's translate a little bit into what happened to practice today. It was a quick practice, 1 hour, in fact, and it was a lot of the starters getting 11-on-11 work as a lot of the backups need rest. They were playing significant snaps most of the practices, and so you need guys that are going to be able to get things done. So guys who did not practice, of course, Brandon Ayuk is not practicing, and that's nothing to be surprised about. We talked about Ricky Pearsall. Jawan Jennings still nursing the oblique, which Kyle Shanahan told us about after the game is why he didn't play. So he's not practicing. Jordan Mason's the hip. We know about Elijah Mitchell. Taylor Hawkins added to the list coming out of the game. He's dealing with a little bit of a knee. If he's unable to play on Friday, that will be the end for him. And unfortunately for Taylor Hawkins, if he gets waived, there's no guarantee that the 49ers get him on the practice squad. They might go with Mahoney over Taylor Hawkins. So we might see his time in San Francisco run its course. That would be unfortunate. I like Taylor Hawkins, but when it comes to play in the box, I think Jalen Mahoney has done so good that he's probably going to be that guy. Of course, Feliciano out, Banks out, Kalia Davis continues to be out. Guys that were overworking on the side field, Ricky Pearsall and Jennings, which means they're just staying in shape. You had Christian McCaffrey, Isaac Yedem, and Elijah Mitchell, all of them getting work with Mitch Wisnowski. That is phenomenal news for the 49ers. That's exactly what you're hoping was going to happen. You're going to get these guys that are going to be able to get their self back and be ready for week one. They're all working back right now. Great news for the 49ers. One highlight from practice had to be the fact that Brock Purdy was able to connect down the field with Robbie Chosen Anderson. A 60-yard play on a vertical route against Diamond Lenore. They had their first team unit out there, and Robbie Anderson makes the play. And that's one of the things that, I was thinking after the game. There was no Robbie Anderson. I talked about it on yesterday's episode. I saw him on video on the sideline, but he never came in the game. So I don't know why. I thought that part of the reason that he made a lot of sense for the 49ers was he had ran Mike McDaniel's offense, over there in Miami, and it's very similar to the 49ers. Maybe they're holding him out, but he was working with the first team offense and caught the ball from Brock Purdy for a touchdown. He is a consistent X receiver. So this is a guy that could end up on the 49ers practice squad as a veteran wide receiver. We'll see what happens with Robbie Anderson, but he's out there making plays, and maybe we'll get to see him against the Raiders. I think it would be interesting. We know about some of the things that comes with Robbie Anderson, but usually he does pretty good on the field. In 2020, he did have a 1,000-yard season, so we'll see how that goes. But the fact that he got past Diamond Lenore and Jair Brown and made the play is really big for the San Francisco 49ers because they need guys that can create separation on their own. And in the game, the guys who I saw do it consistently create separation, Jacob Cowing, of course, he looked pretty good. And then I saw Danny Gray create separation on a couple plays as well. Other than that, it was few and far between. Tate Martin had some good plays. Trent Taylor, the one at the goal line, ball tipped, unable to catch it. That was unfortunate, but they need that. And I think that he's really going to help with that. So 49ers definitely enjoying Robbie Anderson right now. We'll see what that means, for the preseason and then ultimately into the regular season. But the 49ers were taking it easy at practice and just trying to get these guys where they need to be. And I think that they still have some decisions to make at several positions, and several guys are on notice that they're probably on the bubble. The 49ers are going to have to figure out how to get that done and get these guys in the right spots. Now, 49ers roster has to be cut down. We talked about that. And they have a lot of players that they're going to have to make quick decisions on. And so this is one of the most interesting parts about this whole process is you're going to hear about guys who need to make this roster. You're going to hear that, guys like Chris Conley need to make this roster. Before it was Trent Taylor needs to make it because of the punt return. Now we're seeing Jacob Cowing handling punt return. That's going to be a big determining factor when we get into that Raider game. How well does Jacob Cowing return punts? If he executes and dominates the way he did in the first game against the Saints, that he handled the job, and he squares things up and he makes the right decisions, that will make Trent Taylor's ability to make this team a little bit more difficult because Cowing will add on special teams. I think that there's more to this, more nuance to a lot of the positions, and I think those things are going to come out here over the next week. But the 49ers are building towards this Raiders game, and those types of things are going to have to be answered. They're going to have to get answers at the wide receiver position where they have several bodies competing for one spot. I talked about earlier about veterans and the ability to cut a veteran, have them wait, and then make a decision. Maybe they do that with somebody like Chris Conley. You wait, you make a decision, and then you bring him back. Same with a guy like Trent Taylor, but with Conley, you bring him back to the active roster once you've moved guys at other positions. Maybe they could talk to a Rock Ya-Sin about the same thing, even though Rock Ya-Sin has been very good. Rock Ya-Sin is one of the top 5 cornerbacks on this team. Maybe they could get him to say, you know what, you wouldn't have to go through waivers, and we bring you back to the active roster tomorrow if we cut you today so we can keep Luter Jr. and make another roster move. Those are the types of conversations and decisions that are going to happen after that Raider game, that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are going to have these tough decisions to make a choice of who's going to be on this team. So it's not always as clear a cut as, oh, this guy's playing the best. It's how can I keep this guy and this guy? And sometimes that means for some strange roster cuts. So hold on a little bit after the roster cuts come out next week and just see what else the 49ers do. Maybe they're going to bring some guys back. Maybe they're going to navigate, at some of the rules and be able to bring guys back and be able to build the best possible team. So you hear a player gets cut and they've been kind of hovering around the bubble, we'll just take a wait and see approach. And remember, just because somebody was one of your favorites in training camp doesn't mean they're going to end up being a big time player in this league. It happens. We have our guys that we really like, and I think there's going to be some tough cuts for the 49ers. But I really appreciate you guys all coming through for this episode. Injuries for the 49ers, not great, but so far we have a few guys who have lost part of the year. No one that's lost the whole season, thank goodness. And hopefully the 49ers can get this thing together. So please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.